I'm Joe Downer, Archaeological Field Research Manager here at Mount Vernon.
Welcome to Mount Vernon on this beautiful sunny day. We're going to tell you a little bit about one of our most recent discoveries, the Old Necessary.
The Old Necessary was a building that or sometimes can be described as a privy or a bathroom, essentially. So this is one of the older structures on Mount Vernon. George Washington would have had this building for the majority of his lifetime here. It was taken down around 1796, 1797 time frame after the two existing necessaries that are here today were constructed.
Well, we actually discovered this on the course of doing an archaeological survey. Hopefully you can see the mansion behind me to give you an idea of where we're located here. We're a little bit below the main house there, and we're actually going to be doing a little bit of reconstruction on what George Washington called the Ha-Ha wall, which is actually a sunken, also called a sunken wall, a brick wall that actually framed the vista. Can't really turn the camera around. The vista across the Potomac to the Maryland shoreline. We've actually had a series of storms that have damaged the wall. We're going to repair that and bring it back to its 1799 appearance. And in the course of doing that, we're doing an archaeological survey across the entire east lawn, where basically we're going to dig a 2 foot by 2 foot square hole every 20 feet, a test pit, so that we can actually see what might be here that we don't know about, and also a little bit about how the hillside was engineered. In the course of doing this survey, we actually expected, I don't know, might be a strong word, we hope to find the Old Necessary. Obviously we have found it, and we can talk a little bit about how we found it. Right now, Joe is going to explain a bit about the archaeology of the site and point out its major features.
Sure, sir, I'd be happy to.
Go Nats.
So as you can see right here, we've got a very beautiful 10 by 12 brick foundation to the Old Necessary here. Just a little bit about the process of how we found this building. It really was a team effort. Jason and I are just two of the archaeological staff out of many that contributed to this project. And Jason's pulling out some images right now that might be helpful while we explain this. We knew that this necessary was out here on this hill somewhere. And this image that you see right here is taken in the 1950s when it was partially exposed. And I want you can see the brick foundations here. And I want you to take a look at the tree stump in the corner of that image right there. That tree stump is one thing that allowed us to relocate this building in 2019. We actually have a tree map that maps where that tree stump was located. And the tree itself, there's an image of the tree.
Zoom back to 1938 when the tree was not in great health. You can see there's a very large cavity. The technology at the time was actually to fill the cavity with concrete. Obviously that did not help the tree very much. And a little more than a decade and a half later, you have this white oak tree stump. So as Joe mentioned, we actually plotted that out on our modern landscape with using a tree map that dated from around the World War I era. And we actually incorporated that into our research design. This may or may not show up well, but you can see the mansion right here. This is the east lawn. The Potomac is right over here. And everywhere you see a yellow dot is an area we plan on excavating a 2 by 2 foot test unit. The blue area here is where we plotted that we would most likely find the location of the Old Necessary. We weren't sure if it survived, and that's exactly where we're standing now. Obviously it did survive.
That's right. So we started this process by systematically excavating these 2 foot by 2 foot shovel test pits, or STPs. And it really gives us an opportunity to go down and see the sidewall, see the stratigraphy of the hillside, see how it was built together, and then also see, what's in the ground. So for many of these, we did strike out. We did not find a whole lot in some of these STPs. But in a few of them, we kept our eye on the ball, and we really were able to come down and find bits of this foundation. And at that point, we just had to stay in the fight and keep expanding so that we can uncover the entire foundation here. And I really just, if you want to come this way, I'd love to show you some more of this foundation. It's a beautiful English bond. You can zoom in right here and actually see a couple of tiers. So you can see right here, you've got the headers and stretchers to this English bond. Now this section of the wall would have been much bigger, It would have been taller up. We are on a slope, so this wall would have come up pretty high, almost to my chest or neck height area, in order to be level off for the timber frame of the building to be laid on top of there.
Right, so we're actually, as you can see the white string lines here, we are within the interior of the structure. We're actually excavating it in quarters, and we're going to actually take a portion of that and leave, you can see the dark area here on the back side of the quarter area there is still dark fill. We're actually going to leave that for posterity. It's not going to be disturbed in the course of construction events, and we might have new technologies in the future that we don't have right now. So we're actually taking it down, and you can see all the stones and what we call subsoil popping up here, which is pretty much the bottom. And we'll also take soil samples for chemical analysis that we might be able to tell a little bit more about the life and the usage of the building. We actually don't know how old it is at the moment. George Washington called it the Old Necessary in a letter that he wrote in 1795, and that's why we're using the term. The two surviving necessaries at Mount Vernon, attached to each of the garden plots behind the mansion and the view behind us, date from the 1780s. So this one, by 1795, had become, in his words, an eyesore, and he actually ordered it dismantled and moved over for use of the residents of the quarter, the enslaved residents of Mount Vernon, if it was able to be moved. If not, to build them a brand new one. So it was dismantled, so when you look at the foundation, you're looking what was left behind. And we're pretty fortunate to find it in such great shape as it is. We actually have a few historical references other than just words and documents. We actually have two images that we can show you. This is actually a sketch. You can see it's in a book. It's from a journal of a Jamaican planner named Samuel Vaughan, who visited Mount Vernon in 1787 and drew a very accurate map. You see the mansion here, Potomac right here. These are the gardens. Here is the Serpentine and the Bowling Green area. And right over here, number 17, is marked in the key as a necessary. The other two are located at the tops of the gardens. So that tells us that in 1787 it was still standing. 1795 it's ordered to be dismantled, or 1795, sorry. And the very same year, we actually have a visitor from Ireland to the estate named Isaac Weld, and he drew a sketch that was turned into this illustration here, and you can see it's a very great illustration. You see the Potomac, see the mansion, and right over here along the hillside, that little building right there, and I'll show you a closer version in detail. This structure we think is the Old Necessary. So we have one image of what it may have looked like while it was still standing. And it does appear to be a timber frame building sitting on a brick foundation, obviously. Has this nice pyramidal roof and a cupola or some type of finial on the top of the roof with either a weather vane or some other finial that's kind of difficult to make out from this image. This is a very exciting image of this particular privy or necessary because we don't have a lot of surviving 18th century necessaries in the Chesapeake Bay region. We have two that we can actually point to that are of similar size and construction. One is across the Potomac in Maryland, and the other one is at Westover Plantation, the home of William Byrd, along the James River in Tidewater, Virginia. Both of those are comparable size, and both of those are 5-seaters. So we can expect that, for lack of a better term, this is a very fancy privy, and it's intended to be as opulent and kind of impressive as the mansion and the rest of the grounds, including the gardens and everything else here at Mount Vernon. So it's intended to actually impress folks. It probably had at least 3 seats, if not 5, and we're actually hoping to maybe, with the soil chemistry analysis, maybe ferret some of that out. Did I miss anything there?
No, I think that's great. You want to take some time to answer any questions at this point?
Are there any plans to rebuild this place?
Well, we strive to interpret Mount Vernon to the year 1799, which is the year of George Washington's death. And since this building was taken down prior to that, we will not actually do any sort of physical reconstruction. However, and Dr. Burroughs can speak to this as well. We do a lot of digital reconstructions. We do a lot of laser scanning and things like that that can help us digitally rebuild the structure so we can experience it in that way.
Yep, we also have the historical reference that it was meant to be removed from the landscape in the 1790s, so we'll probably adhere to those wishes. But as Joe mentioned, we're using photogrammetry, we're using 3D laser scanning. We should both also mention that this is still in the course of excavation, so we're not done yet. It does look, when you look at the bricks, you can definitely tell they are in not the best shape. And we also should mention, if you can, I'm not sure how well you can see this in the camera, but if you look at the sidewall over there, you have this kind of orange tan clay. All of that is added around 1972 when this area was impacted by Hurricane Agnes, that by the time it hit this part of Virginia was Tropical Storm Agnes, and we actually had a landslide where part of the hill slid towards the Potomac and part of the Ha-Ha wall actually collapsed as well. So when that was reconstructed, fill was actually brought in, extra soil, to reconstruct this part of the hillside, and that's what you're looking at over there. That's all pretty modern soil, and so it's been impacted quite a bit by these storm events. So we're fortunate to have as good a preservation as we do have, but if you can, I also don't know how well this kind of shows up in the camera shot, but this is a very steep slope. It's kind of a tricky spot to build anything. But with a privy such as this, Joe was mentioning that the brick would have come up much higher, and then we had the frame, the wooden frame built on top of that. You would have had some form of clean out here in the back. Without getting too graphic, those clean outs tend to be either kind of brick arches or trap doors where you use what looks like an army entrenching tool. It's kind of a cross between a shovel and an agricultural hoe, and you would have kind of scraped out the waste and disposed of it that way. So all of that is going to leave a chemical signature as well as the artifacts and other objects that are left behind.
All right, so Amy asks, who would have used as necessary? Would George Washington have used it, or was it intended for other residents as well?
This would have been one of the main household necessaries. So you would have had the Washingtons as well as any visiting guests or dignitaries would have been using this necessary as well.
Remember, it's designed to be fancy, so it is designed to impress, and there were so many visitors to Mount Vernon, especially between the Revolution, the presidency. This was a very happening place with many, many visitors over the course of that time period, so this would have been the main service area for those folks as well.
All right. Have you found any artifacts?
We have. We find artifacts in almost every single shovel load of dirt that we put in the ground here at Mount Vernon. In this particular area, as Jason mentioned, a lot of this clay fill that we've removed in order to get down to the foundation of the necessary was put in around the 1970s. We also showed you the photo a little bit earlier of the structure exposed in the 1950s. And so a lot of the artifacts we found actually date to those time periods. But we are getting down. We also mentioned some of the subsoil, and we are down to the foundation as well. We do find 18th century artifacts as well. You can actually see a little bit of window or bottle glass that's coming out right over here.
Follow my shadow right there.
Yeah, follow the shadow right here. We've got a little bit of bottle glass. It's a good 18th century wine bottle right there. And then up higher in the unit that we're leaving unexcavated, there's actually a little bit of creamware that's also popping out as well. So
That would be this right here.
excellent.
Which
Shadows
we
are great.
know is generally 1762 is the year of its initial production in Staffordshire, England. But we know from historical documents that George Washington's order of creamware arrived in Mount Vernon in 1769. So that actually gives us a relative time frame that we can date the soil that surrounds the object.
All right, so related to that question, as archaeologists at Mount Vernon, have you ever found anything that you were not expecting to find?
I think if you asked
Almost
each one of
every
us,
day.
yeah, every day really, and if you asked each one of us, we'd probably say something different that comes to mind. I often enjoy finding some of those more modern artifacts from tourists that have dropped things, from Washington's time all the way to now. So usually in our upper layers, we'll find, really interesting things from the 1950s, the 1930s, the 1920s, even Civil War period, War of 1812 period stuff. And these are all people that are coming to Mount Vernon for the same reason that we all come to Mount Vernon today. They're coming because it's the home of Washington, and they want to walk the same ground and experience the place. And so it's a connection with not only, what we find archaeologically, it's not only a connection with the Washingtons and the enslaved people and all the people that were here, but we also are connected with everyone who's come here ever since. And so a lot of those things are often, you expect to find them, but they're always unexpected at the same time. And they tell really great stories.
All right, so Megan asked, how long do you expect the excavation to take?
That's a good question. It really depends on Mother Nature. This is a bit of a tricky excavation site because of the slope. I think every one of us has tumbled at least once or twice trying to get down and around. And it's actually interesting, that's the reason why this structure is here, to take advantage of that steep slope, and it's constructed kind of ingeniously to take advantage of that. It does take us a little bit longer just to deal with the difficulty of excavating on a slope such as this. And it really does depend on, I guess we're still at the tail end of hurricane season. Better knock on some wood or something. From where we are now, we're probably looking at least a few more weeks.
All right, so backtracking a little bit, how did you know where to begin excavating?
Well, so the tree that we mentioned earlier, we actually do have a tree map that maps that tree on the landscape, and we were able to overlay that on the modern landscape. As Jason showed you a little bit earlier, the map of our STPs, of our shovel test pit locations, and you can actually see where we overlaid that tree. And so we knew, based off of that photo from the 1950s, that the necessary was roughly in that area. And so we started with those shovel test pits, and eventually we came down to part of that foundation here. And at that point, it was a matter of just opening up additional units to expand out, to track more of the foundation, and then finally you have what we see here, the entire building structure exposed.
The real trick is we weren't sure what kind of shape it would be in. We kind of knew the general area, but we knew it had been opened once before, and we had that one photograph from 1954. But we also knew that there had been several major environmental impacts, such as the hurricane. So I think we're all pleasantly surprised to see that it's in such great shape.
Right,
They're
so
very thrilled about the gnats up there.
Yeah, they are.
I don't know who isn't.
A question about necessaries. Was there only relieving oneself in a necessary or bathing as well?
Well, that's a good question as well. The surviving necessaries that we have, and I should mention that the one in Westover, for example, actually has a fireplace in there, which makes you think, well, 5 people could have been using it at once. It probably was not the case. And given kind of 18th century hygiene, basically you're going to be washing in a wash basin, probably in the mansion house at this particular site. And think along the lines of having a wash basin about yay big, and you're not really kind of taking a submersible bath the way we think of taking a bath or a shower today. So this is pretty much for just waste purposes. You're also using chamber pots in the house and the other surrounding buildings, and those could be emptied as well in a variety of places. So.
All right, so Philippa asks, are there roots still in the ground from the tree that was removed?
We do find plenty of roots and organic matter. I don't think we've found anything that we can attribute directly to that tree. We do have a number of more recent shrubs and things that have been planted in the area or that are growing next to the site. And so those roots tend to splay out a lot, and we do find those for sure.
Okay, so Linda also asks, do you allow locals to help dig or only professionals?
That is a great question. We do take volunteer help on our site down in the Slave Cemetery and Memorial. So this project, as Jason has said, it's a pretty tricky project, and so this is just a professional staff excavation site here, but on our project down in the cemetery, we do take volunteers to assist with that project. And there we're just working to scrape off the first few layers of topsoil and expose the very tops of grave shafts. So we're not exhuming any graves or anything like that. We're just trying to document where these graves are located so that we can map them in, and that they won't be impacted by any future tree plantings or utilities that have to go through there. And that way we'll also know where these people are, so we'll be able to commemorate them in that way.
We also take volunteers in our laboratory facility year-round, 1 day a week. And so if you are interested in volunteering, you can actually check out the archaeology page on Mount Vernon's website. And there are links to send us emails and inquire about that, and we'll definitely send you more information.
All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions at this time, I'm sure we'll get more. But thank you guys so much for joining us today. Appreciate you showing us around. And can people come see this site when they visit Mount Vernon?
Absolutely. Whenever you see archaeology going on, feel free to walk up to the rope and engage us. We would love to share with you what we're working on, what we're finding that day even.
Great. All right. Thanks, Joe and Jason.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
spending some time with us.
Yeah, go Nats.